The first time I noticed it, I thought I was imagining things. The tea Cassian brought me every night, chamomile with honey. The way our mother used to make it had a faint aftertaste I couldn't place. Bitter, almost metallic. I told myself it was just the brand, maybe a different box from the store, nothing more. But the way I felt afterward was harder to ignore. For weeks now, I'd been falling into unnaturally heavy sleep, the kind that left me groggy and disoriented long after sunrise. I'd wake to my alarm blaring, head pounding, as though I'd been drugged. I told myself it was the stress of long days at the university archives, the fluorescent lights and endless stacks of dusty records. Still, the feeling clung to me, unsettling and wrong. It wasn't only the sleep. Some mornings, small things seemed off. My laptop left closed when I knew I'd left it open. My purse sitting at a slightly different angle on the chair, a drawer in my desk half open, though I never left it that way. At first, I blamed myself, distraction, fatigue, memory lapses, but deep down, unease crept in. The house was mine now, after our parents passed, and the only other person living here was Cassian. My brother had moved in 6 months earlier, claiming he needed time to get back on his feet. He kept odd hours, disappearing for days and then reappearing with vague stories about consulting jobs. I wanted to believe him. He was my brother. But his eyes lingered too long when he handed me that blue ceramic mug every night, watching me drink as though it mattered. The night I pressed the cup to my lips and caught the bitterness again. I couldn't shake it. I stared at the steam curling upward, memory flashing of every time I'd woken foggy, every misplaced object, every unsettling gap in my recollection. A thought I didn't want to voice took root, heavy and undeniable. Something was in my tea, and as much as I tried to convince myself otherwise, I knew it wasn't an accident. That night, I resolved to test him. The next evening, I steadied my hands as Cassian slid the mug toward me across the kitchen table. The familiar chamomile scent rose in gentle waves, but the bitterness lingered in my memory, sharp and unwelcome. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching as though the simple act of sipping tea meant everything to him. I lifted the mug and forced a small smile. "Smells good," I said, buying myself time. The liquid touched my lips, but I didn't swallow. I waited until his phone buzzed in the other room and he stepped away, muttering something under his breath. In that brief absence, I poured the contents quickly into the sink and refilled the mug with water from the tap, adding a drop of honey to cover the difference. By the time he returned, I was holding the mug between my palms, as if savoring the warmth. Almost finished. I told him, tilting the cup to show him the liquid level. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't name: expectation. Maybe irritation, but he said nothing. Later, when he suggested we call it a night, I followed our routine as if nothing had changed. I brushed my teeth, changed into pajamas, and slipped into bed, leaving the door slightly ajar. My body pulsed with adrenaline, but I forced my breathing into a steady rhythm, deep and slow. Minutes passed. Then Cassian's footsteps creaked up the stairs. He lingered in the doorway, whispering my name. When I didn't respond, he came closer, bending low. I felt his fingers brush my eyelid, lifting gently, testing for resistance. My heart hammered, but I remained still, satisfied. He straightened and left the room. A moment later, faint voices drifted from below. His tone was low, clipped, almost unrecognizable. There was a sharpness to it, a precision that didn't belong to the brother I thought I knew. I lay frozen under the covers, realizing the test had worked. Cassian truly believed I was unconscious. The farmhouse had always carried familiar sounds, the sigh of old beams settling at night, the wind scratching against the siding, but now every creak sharpened my nerves. I lay stiff beneath the quilt, eyes narrowed just enough to trace Cassian's shadow as it shifted across the bedroom. He didn't pause near the bed. Instead, he crouched in the far corner by the window, the place our father once took pride in finishing with hand-sanded oak planks. At first, I thought he was searching for something dropped, but then I heard the faint scrape of metal against wood. I dared a glance. In his hand was a narrow pry bar, one he must have smuggled upstairs without my noticing. With practiced precision, he wedged it beneath the boards and levered them up, each movement controlled, silent. My breath caught. He had done this before. The plank lifted smoothly, revealing a cavity beneath. Cassian reached inside and drew out a metal box, dull with age but locked tight. He rested it on the floor and opened it with delicate care, as though its contents were sacred. Even from the bed I saw the thick bundles of cash, edges crisp and new. He set them aside and withdrew a neat stack of passports, not one, but several, each bearing his photograph under different names. My stomach twisted. The next items were photographs, spread across the floor with eerie precision. Women stared back in grainy images, some captured in daylight, others under the glare of street lamps. All of them bore a resemblance: dark hair, similar build, mid-30s. None of them were me, yet every face made my pulse quicken. Were they strangers he had followed, or women who once trusted him, as I had? Cassian studied the photographs with an expression I couldn't place, half calculation, half satisfaction. A faint smile tugged at his mouth, one that belonged to someone I didn't know. Slowly, he replaced everything into the box, set the plank back in place, and pressed it flush with the floor. I squeezed my eyes shut as his footsteps shifted toward the bed, my body motionless beneath the blanket. Inside, the truth thundered. My brother had carved a secret life into the bones of our childhood home, and I had just seen the proof. Sleep never came to me that night. I lay rigid in the dark, my mind spinning back through every oddity I had brushed aside. The laptop left warm on mornings when I was certain I had shut it down. The purse that never seemed to sit exactly where I'd placed it. Bank alerts I dismissed as clerical errors, small withdrawals, quick logins from unknown devices. Each one had been a warning, and I had silenced them. The more I thought, the more threads connected. 3 weeks ago, I woke to find my phone on the nightstand, though I'd left it charging in the kitchen. Another time, a file from the university archives had been pulled up on my laptop, one I hadn't touched in months. I told myself fatigue made me careless, but I knew now that Cassian had been watching, testing, collecting. The betrayal cut deeper because it wasn't just any intruder, it was my brother. Memories surfaced of our parents last year, when I stayed to care for them while Cassian drifted in and out with excuses about work on the coast. At the reading of the will, the farmhouse deed was placed in my hands. He had smiled then, but the sharpness in his eyes betrayed him. "You always get what you want, Ilyana," he'd muttered afterward. "The house should have been mine." I'd laughed it off at the time, unwilling to admit how much resentment pulsed under his words. He was the eldest, yes, but he had been absent when it mattered most. I never questioned why our parents entrusted the farm to me. I believed Cassian had moved on, that he only needed a place to steady himself, but watching him unearth a box of cash, passports, and photographs proved otherwise. This wasn't simply about old family bitterness or wounded pride. Something larger was unfolding, and I was caught in its center. I sat upright the next morning, dizzy with the weight of what I now knew. It was no longer possible to dismiss the signs. I needed someone outside these walls to hear me, to see what I had seen, before it was too late. By the time I arrived at the university the next day, my nerves were stretched so thin I could hardly keep my hands steady on the steering wheel. The farmhouse felt dangerous now, each creak of wood carrying Cassian's shadow. I needed someone who wouldn't dismiss my fears as stress or paranoia, That someone was Corinne Latham. We'd met years ago when she took a part-time job in the archives while working toward her paralegal license. She was sharp, practical, and not afraid to tell me when I was overthinking. If anyone could help me untangle this, it was her. We sat across from each other in a small cafe near campus. I stirred my coffee, trying to find the right words, before finally whispering, "I think Cassian's been drugging me." Corinne froze, her spoon clinking against the saucer. "Drugging you, Ilyana. That's serious. Why would you think that I told her everything, the bitter taste in the tea, the nights of heavy sleep, the floorboards, the box? I even described the passports and the photographs of women with hair like mine. Saying it aloud made it sound unhinged, yet Corinne's face only grew paler. "Let me check something," she said, already pulling out her laptop. Over the years, she'd developed a knack for digging into public records. Within minutes, she was scrolling through employment databases. "Cassian told you he consults in Portland." "Right." I nodded. She turned the screen toward me. "There's no record of him ever being employed by that firm. Nothing under his name. And when I ran his social security number, it didn't match correctly in the system. It's flagged as inconsistent." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cafe's draft. So he's lying about his job. And maybe about more than that. Corinne leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Ilyana, you need evidence. Real evidence. If you go to the police now with just suspicion, they'll brush you off. But if you can show what he's doing, photos, recordings, documents, then they'll have to listen." Her words settled over me like a command. Proof. That was the only way forward. That night, I returned to the farmhouse with a plan already forming in my mind. That evening, I moved through the house with deliberate calm, though my heart thrummed with every step. Cassian hummed faintly in the kitchen as he prepared the tea, the same ritual he had perfected for weeks. I excused myself to my room, slipping my phone onto the dresser angled toward the bed. I checked the red recording light twice before forcing myself to breathe evenly. Proof, that was the only word echoing in my mind. When he entered with the blue ceramic mug, I accepted it with a practiced smile. I lifted it to my lips, letting a trace of the liquid touch my tongue before lowering the cup again. The bitterness was still there, undeniable. I murmured that I was tired and set the mug down half empty. He seemed satisfied. I lay in bed, feigning drowsiness until I could no longer hold my eyes open. This time, though, the camera watched with me. The next morning, after Cassian left the farmhouse, I locked the door and rushed to my phone. 8 hours of footage waited. I scrubbed forward, my pulse quickening as I saw myself lying motionless. The picture of sleep. At midnight, Cassian appeared in the frame. He stood over me for a long moment, calling my name softly, then shaking my shoulder. My body never stirred. He smiled. I watched him cross the room, lifting my purse from the chair and emptying its contents onto the desk. He photographed my driver's license, scribbled numbers from my bank cards, even unfolded slips of paper with passwords I kept hidden. When he moved to my laptop, my stomach turned. He opened it with ease, typing quickly as though he already knew the password. Near 3 a.m, he made a call, pacing near the window. My phone picked up fragments. "Timeline is good. She doesn't suspect. The medication works." The others were handled. I gripped the edge of the dresser, nausea rising. He placed everything back carefully, kissed my forehead, and left as if nothing had happened. By sunrise, the evidence was undeniable. My brother was not just drugging me, he was planning something far larger, and I was next on his list. I met Corinne the following afternoon at her apartment, the folder she placed on the table already thick with printed pages. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Ilyana, you need to see this." Inside were clippings from newspapers and digital records she had traced through public archives. The first was from Seattle, a woman in her 30s, brunette, gone without a trace 2 years ago. The second came from Sacramento, another woman, same age range, same dark hair, reported missing after last being seen leaving work. The third was from Phoenix, a nearly identical story. All three had bank accounts drained within weeks of their disappearance. All three had professional positions that granted access to financial or institutional records. And all three, I realized with a sinking stomach, looked hauntingly similar to me. Cassian has a pattern, Corinne said. He targets women who can open doors for him, women he can erase. I stared at the photographs, my throat tightening. You think he's done this before? She met my eyes, grim. I think he's done this more than once, and I think you're next. The words rang like a verdict. My hands shook as I passed the papers back to her. We have to go to the police. That evening, we sat across from Lieutenant Darius Cole at the Salem Police Department. He listened carefully as I described the tea, the floorboards, the recordings. Corinne slid the folder across the desk, her research neat and damning. Cole leaned back, folding his hands. This is troubling, but it's still circumstantial. What you've given me shows suspicion, not intent. To make an arrest, we need direct evidence of a crime about to happen or happening. My chest tightened, so I just wait. Pretend to drink what he gives me until he slips. Cole's expression softened. I know that sounds unbearable. But if your brother is planning something, catching him in the act is the only way to stop him for good. We'll position officers nearby. You won't be alone. The weight of his words pressed hard on me. Proof meant playing dead a little longer, while Cassian carried out whatever plan he had been crafting in the shadows. That night, as I returned to the farmhouse, the decision was already carved into me. I would lie still until he revealed everything. The farmhouse felt colder than usual that night, though every window was shut. I followed the routine as if nothing had changed. Tea on the table, polite small talk, my feigned drowsiness. Cassian seemed lighter, almost cheerful, like a man nearing the end of a long wait. When I set the mug aside, half empty, he smiled with a satisfaction that chilled me. Upstairs, I lay still in bed, the lamp within reach. My heart counted the minutes as I forced my breath into steady waves. Cassian's footsteps came close to midnight, each one deliberate on the stairs. He paused at my doorway, called my name twice, then stepped inside. I cracked my eyes just enough to see him kneel again by the window. The oak board lifted smoothly, and the metal box emerged. This time, though, he didn't linger over cash or photographs. From beneath the stack of passports, he pulled a small glass vial filled with clear liquid and a syringe wrapped in paper. He held it carefully, almost tenderly, before whispering into the dark. Thursday morning. Ilyana. Just one accident. No one will question it. I bit the inside of my cheek, fighting the urge to gasp. His words were final, rehearsed, already written into his plan. With shaking fingers, I reached for the lamp on my nightstand. 3 quick flicks of the switch. The signal glowed across the room, and before Cassian could react, the front door burst open downstairs. Boots thundered against wood, shouts filled the air. Cassian Mercer Police! Cassian spun toward me, the vial still in his hand. Rage twisted his face, and his voice broke into a roar. The land, the name, it should have been mine. He lunged, eyes wild, but the officers surged in through the bedroom door. Lieutenant Cole struck first, knocking Cassian off balance, while 2 others pulled him to the ground. The syringe skittered under the bed as handcuffs snapped closed, pinned against the floor. Cassian glared at me with a venom I'd never seen. This isn't over. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, knowing the night had changed everything. The weeks that followed blurred into interviews, court filings, and endless hours of recounting the same nightmare. Detectives uncovered more than I ever wanted to know. Cassian had been tied to accounts in multiple states, each linked to women who had vanished under eerily similar circumstances. Seattle, Sacramento, Phoenix. The same faces Corinne had shown me now carried the weight of proof. My brother hadn't just resented me. He had been living as a predator, moving from one identity to the next. At the farmhouse, silence returned after the chaos. The floorboards near the window were replaced, the cavity sealed for good. I couldn't bear to look at the scarred wood, so I planted a young magnolia tree in the yard where sunlight touched most of the day. Its roots would grow where deception once hid, a reminder that something living and honest could rise from the hollow he left behind. Neighbors whispered when they passed, some offering sympathy, others curiosity. I learned to meet their eyes steadily, even when shame tugged at me for not seeing sooner. Corinne reminded me it wasn't weakness to trust it was human. And standing before a community forum months later, telling my story aloud, I realized she was right. The farmhouse felt different once my voice was no longer silenced by fear. Its walls no longer echoed with suspicion. I chose to open its doors, hosting small gatherings, teaching students from the university about local history, even letting them see the magnolia in bloom. Cassian's trial stretched on, each revelation darker than the last, until the verdict was read and his sentence sealed. But my life no longer revolved around what he had taken. It revolved around what I had reclaimed. In the end, what's more dangerous, the stranger outside, or the sibling you thought you knew inside your home?